Hey everyone. Sometimes you just gotta dive into a good mystery, right? And today we're going deep, really deep into the heart of Indonesian mythology. We're talking about Ratu Pantai Selatan.
Queen of the South Sea.
Exactly. But here's the thing, and this is where it gets really interesting. We're dealing with stories from Java, Sunda, Bali, all swirling around this incredibly powerful figure.
It's a rich tapestry of beliefs. And you guys, our listeners, you know how much we love to untangle a good mythical mystery. And we've got some great material to work with today.
Oh, absolutely. We've got excerpts from this. Well, it's more of a firsthand account. This YouTube video we found packed with local interpretations, beliefs, even some encounters, people who claim to have seen her.
It's going to be a fascinating deep dive.
Totally. But before we get completely lost in the depths of it all, there's one thing we got to clear up.
Okay, I'm intrigued. Hit me with it.
So, Ratu Pantai Selatan, Queen of the South Sea, right? It's often used for two distinct figures, like two queens sharing the spotlight.
Oh, I've definitely seen this before, even in my own research.
Right.
It happens all the time as stories evolve and blend. Think of it like different branches of the same mythical family tree.
I like that. Yeah, that makes total sense.
So in this case, we're talking about Kanjeng Ratu Kidul
Okay.
and Ni Roro Kidul,
Mm-hmm.
two queens, each with their own captivating stories.
Okay, so let's break it down then. Kanjeng Ratu Kidul. What's the vibe? What kind of queen are we talking about here?
Think like benevolent spirit residing in the highest heavens, but her influence is anything but distant. We're talking shape-shifting, appearing throughout history in various forms.
Whoa, okay.
One she's the crashing waves of the ocean. The next, she's the fiery breath of Mount Merapi.
That's some serious range. Not your average queen, that's for sure. And what's with this whole spiritual marriage thing I keep hearing about? Javanese rulers were really into making her their supernatural spouse, right?
Yeah, it's a fascinating tradition. So Javanese rulers, they'd seek this spiritual union with Kanjeng Ratu Kidul, believing it granted them, legitimacy, power, that kind of thing. It was like a divine stamp of approval on their rule.
Okay, so not just strategic. This is next level ambition. Marrying for power is one thing, but marrying a goddess, that's a whole other level of I need to secure this reign. It really makes you appreciate the deep, deep reverence people had for her. But we can't forget our other queen, Ni Roro Kidul. How does she fit into all of this?
So Ni Roro Kidul is often portrayed as Kanjeng Ratu Kidul's, you could say, loyal servant or minister. She's often leading an army of spirits.
Okay, now that's an army I would not want to mess with. Supernatural forces at your command, that's a power move right there. But you mentioned that her story has some variations. What kind of plot twists are we talking about here?
It's interesting because Ni Roro Kidul has, multiple names, variations in her story, which suggests a really complex and evolving mythology.
It really makes you wonder, what is it about her story that attracted so many different interpretations, right? It's she's this blank canvas for people's hopes and fears, but also their fascination with the power of the ocean. Origin stories, right?
Yeah.
It's where it all began, the mythological equivalent of a detective novel. So lay it on me. Where did Kanjeng Ratu Kidul come from? What are the theories?
Ooh, we've got some good ones. Some say she is the wind, a force of nature given human form. Others believe she's the goddess Dui Noang Wulan, but instead of ruling the heavens, she's taken to the ocean depths.
Okay, so we're talking primordial forces here. I can see how that fits. But what about this whole Queen of Sheba connection? I gotta admit, I did not have that on my 2024 mythology bingo card.
It's a testament to how interconnected those ancient cultures were, even across vast distances. It's this idea of a powerful female figure resonated across kingdoms and continents.
Yeah, it's ancient globalization, but way cooler stories than trade routes and spices. So we've got wind goddesses, celestial beings, even international royalty. Are there any origin stories that are a little more grounded in Javanese history?
Well, there's one. It's a tale that casts her as the wrong daughter of a Batak king, a story of betrayal, loss, and ultimately this transformation into a being of immense power.
Okay, now that's a backstory. That's a queen with a score to settle. But what about Ni Roro Kidul? Her origin story's got to be just as juicy, right?
Oh, absolutely. It was common woman portrays her as this Sundanese princess, cursed with a disfiguring skin ailment. So she's cast out, ostracized, and finds solace, and ultimately, incredible power in the embrace of the Southern Sea.
Man, it's tragic, but also empowering. She's cast out, but then rises to command armies of spirits and wield the power of the ocean itself. No wonder that story has stuck around. But I think I read that there are some other versions of her story too, right?
Yeah, there are a few. Some link her to a queen with leprosy, again, hitting those themes of isolation and societal stigma. Others talk about a different cursed princess, but her beauty is hidden beneath a magical veil. Each telling just adds another layer to her mystique.
It's like each community found something in her story that they connected with, right? Like their own experiences, their own relationship with the ocean, with the natural world.
Precisely, and that's what's so cool about oral traditions. They're not static,
Yeah.
They're alive. They're shaped and reshaped over generations. Hopes, fears, values, it's all reflected in how these stories are told and retold.
It's really amazing though, right? How these stories give us a window into the past. But okay, enough about origins. Let's get into like the real world impact. How do these queens, these figures of myth and legend, actually show up in the lives of Indonesians today?
Now that's when things get really interesting, because it's one thing to tell stories about powerful beings, but it's another thing entirely to, integrate them into your worldview.
Right. It's like it's the difference between reading about a storm and actually feeling the wind and rain, right? So how do they actually manifest? Give me the details.
Well, for starters, both Kanjeng Ratu Kidul and Yi Roro Kidul are seen as protectors, guardians of Java, its people, its shores. But, and this is important, they are not to be messed with.
Right, like you don't want to get on the wrong side of a queen, especially one who, lives in the ocean. So, oh, what are we talking about here? Just like bad luck at sea, or is there something more to it?
Think about it, right? It's about respect.
Yeah.
Respecting the balance of nature. Ni Roro Kidul especially, she's associated with those powerful natural forces.
Oh, yeah, yeah.
A raging storm, a sudden flood. Those could be seen as, signs of her displeasure.
So it's like, yeah, a healthy dose of respect for the ocean and its power, personified in these queens.
Exactly.
And that respect manifests in like rituals and offerings.
Well,
So
so
tell me more about that. What kind of stuff are we talking about?
during the Javanese New Year, Satu Suro, people will leave offerings along the southern coast to appease the queen, seeking her blessing, for a safe and prosperous year.
It's pretty wild how these ancient beliefs are still so present, woven into everyday life. And it's not just about like avoiding their wrath. It's like actively seeking their favor, right? Acknowledging their power as part of like the natural order of things.
100%. And that leads us to another fascinating aspect of these beliefs, the color green.
Okay, color symbolism. I'm always here for it. What's the deal with green?
So there's this widespread belief that wearing green near the southern sea, it's dangerous. Incredibly dangerous, even. It's considered the queen's color. And to wear it is it's a major sign of disrespect. You're basically inviting her unwanted attention.
That is a fashion rule I have never heard before. It really makes you wonder, though, like, where did these beliefs come from? Are they based on, I don't know, like historical events, or is it something more like intangible?
It's tough to say for sure. Could be ancient taboos, natural occurrences, but people give them these mythical explanations, or maybe, it's a little bit of everything. But the point is, regardless of where they came from, these beliefs, they're taken seriously. They shape how people interact with the ocean, how they view the unseen forces at play.
Right, like just because something is quote unquote a myth doesn't mean it doesn't have real weight. It's a good reminder that the line between myth and reality, it's not always so clear cut. Speaking of blurry lines, we got to talk about these eyewitness accounts. People who claim to have actually met Ratu Pantai Selatan. Were there any that really stood out to you?
There were definitely a few. One that comes to mind, this caretaker who was fasting. It's a common practice in a lot of cultures, seeking spiritual clarity.
Yeah, totally.
Well, he was fasting and claimed to have seen Nai Roro Kidul, described her as radiant, queenly, but also, her presence was, awe-inspiring, but also kind of terrifying at the same time.
It's that classic idea, right, that if you deny yourself those earthly pleasures, your spiritual senses become heightened. Like you can see things that are normally hidden.
Exactly. And then there are all the fishermen who claim to have seen a beautiful woman, often during times of danger, that resembles the traditional depictions of the queen.
It's like, is it really her? Or is it their mind's way of making sense of the chaos, finding comfort in the face of the ocean's power?
Or both, right. I mean, our brains are wired to find patterns, to look for explanations for the things we don't understand.
Yeah.
And in a way, isn't that what myths and legends do? They give us a framework for understanding the world.
Totally. But there was one story that I found particularly fascinating. The painter, Basuki Abdullah, his daughter had that whole encounter.
Oh, yeah, yeah. When she was a young girl at the Ines Amadera Hotel, claimed she met this woman who looked exactly like her father's paintings of Ni Roro Kadul.
And she even, like, spoke to her, right? Asked about her father's well-being in, like, a very specific Javanese dialect.
Yeah, it's a detail that makes the whole thing even creepier. Like,
Right.
it's that extra layer of like, wait, was this real? And then, of course, the woman just vanishes.
Gone. Just like that.
Yeah.
So where does that leave us? Like, how do we make sense of these stories? Are we supposed to believe them literally?
Honestly, I think that's the beauty of it all, right? There's no one right answer, no definitive interpretation. Maybe the real power of these stories isn't about proving them true or false, but about what they tell us about, about us, about humanity,
Yeah.
our relationship with nature, with the unknown, our desire to find meaning in a world that often feels completely random and chaotic.
It's true, you know? Sometimes the best stories are the ones that leave you with more questions than answers. So we gotta ask, what about you? Have you ever experienced something that just, like, completely challenged your understanding of how the world works? Something that made you question if there was more to reality than meets the eye? Let us know.
Until next time, keep exploring, keep asking those tough questions, and as always, keep diving deep into the mysteries that surround us.